This one has been requested multiple times, and I finally remembered to cover the story. I don't know if you guys are familiar with what happened to Travis King. Travis King is a U.S. soldier. For whatever reason, while he was in South Korea, he decided to dash across the borderline between South Korea and North Korea, and he was detained in North Korea. This is another bizarre story. Many are trying to figure out why he would just do that. What does his family say? How do they feel about this position? Do they think he did this on his own? Witnesses have said that he did, but why would he do it, knowing as a U.S. soldier, you would be detained in North Korea? Was there something that drove him to run across that border? Let's go ahead and get started with this clip here, and then we're going to hear a response from his family. This is another story that is just bizarre to me.
Family of the U.S. soldier who crossed into North Korea last week is now begging American officials to fight for his safe return. U.S. officials Monday said that they are working to contact North Korea through the UN. The country has given very few details about the discussion so far. Travis King joined a tour group visiting the demilitarized zone between North and South Korea and apparently sprinted across the border. It is not clear why he did this. In the weekend,
let's pause here. I'll show you that picture right here. So you can see him here. Okay.
Apparently sprinted across the border. It is not clear why he did this. In the week and a half since, King is believed to have been detained by North Korea. I want to bring in Ian Hurd, the director of the Weinberg College Center for International and Area Studies at Northwestern. Ian, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Ian, right now, there's no word on the fate of Travis King. His family says that his impulsive move to dash over the border was uncharacteristic of him. At this point, what is top of mind for you about this? What is the most concerning thing?
Well, it's an incredibly sad case. What he's done is sort of ostentatiously dangerous, and he'll be really lucky if he gets out alive. He's also put the American government in a really tough spot because the U.S. doesn't have a whole lot of tools for bringing people back from North Korea, since the North Korean government has such a closed attitude towards relations with the outside.
I mean, you say
the only tool that I can think of that can bring him out of North Korea is Dennis Rodman. And I'm not trying to be funny, but Dennis Rodman does have that relationship with North Korea. He's been there multiple times. He's the only person that I can think of that can get Travis to come back to the U.S. But in reference to government officials, probably not. Let's continue here. So it says, who is the detainee in North Korea custody? He's 23 years old. He's a U.S. Army private, second class. He's from Racine, Wisconsin. He joined the Army in January 2021. And he served 47-day sentence in South Korea prior to entering North Korea. We'll get into that a little bit more as well.
He'll be lucky if he gets out alive. Tell us more about that.
Well, the North Korean government has made a long-term strategy of basically using anxiety that it can create in the outside world as its tool of foreign policy. So it uses every opportunity it can to try to create fear and discomfort among outsiders, and uses that to try to extract concessions from the U.S. and other governments. So I would imagine that they'll be using this fellow as a tool in that game, and whatever they can do to make his situation worse, they will see as a virtue, because it might increase their leverage relative to the U.S. government.
Yeah, and we can't help.
I want to answer Outside Steeler fan. Why was he in North Korea? He was in South Korea, but he sprinted across the border to North Korea. We don't know why. But this is really scary.
But think about Otto Warmbier, the American student who was held by North Korea, who was in such bad physical and mental condition. He died within days of finally being released. How does being held by North Korea compare with a country like Russia that we see in the headlines all the time? How concerned should Travis's family be?
Well, I think I'm sorry to say that they should be extremely concerned, but we don't know very much at all about the thinking inside the North Korean government, and there's very little publicly available information. I think what the U.S. government is doing now is probably the best strategy, and that is to keep things really quiet. I think the National Security Council is working full tilt behind the scenes to try to get information, but by not amplifying the anxiety, the U.S. is doing a very good job to try to get him home safely.
You know, we've heard about prisoners in Russia so much recently. North Korea, you touched on this earlier, is...
Did you guys notice the propaganda? Notice how they had to mention Russia when this has nothing to do with Russia? It's like any chance, any opportunity that they get, let's throw Russia in here as well. Like they didn't have to. This situation took place in North Korea, not in Russia, but they found a way to include that.
Complicated in a different way, obviously led by Kim Jong-un. Tell me more about this leader. Why is working with him and his government so complicated?
The government there for decades now has been running essentially a gigantic social experiment of trying to run a government in a kind of autarkic dictatorship that's not working. It's starving the people, but they keep doing it because they have the power to keep themselves in office. So it's a little bit like the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia in the 1970s, a giant failed social experiment, but the people at the top keep running it and everybody else suffers from it. So it's a very closed system, and that makes King's situation much worse than somebody in Russia, simply because the Russian prison system is a little more transparent, horrible as it is. So the North Korean security apparatus is so tightly closed as to be almost impenetrable to at least the public eye.
I'm sorry. It's just the amount of propaganda, how they found a way to bring up Russia multiple times. Now, the family did speak out. They are very concerned, as you could imagine. They're basically have said, like, this is very unusual behavior of Travis, that he wouldn't react this way. Now, I'm going to say a couple of things, okay? Coming from a military family, I grew up around military like most of my life. And I am wondering if something happened to him after he enlisted. I don't know. Maybe there was some type of abuse. Maybe there was some type of mistreatment. I'm wondering if something happened to him while he was overseas, and him running across the border to North Korea was almost as if he was running away from something. And that's what I'm wondering. Or it could be maybe he had a mental break. We don't know. There could be a mental health issue or underlying mental health issue that maybe was not diagnosed. Don't know. But I want you to hear from the family what they had to say about this situation.
Are exclusive with the family of Travis King, the American soldier who's being held in North Korea after running across the border from South Korea. Chief Global Affairs anchor Martha Raddatz has the story. Good morning, Martha.
Good morning, George. The big question, of course, this morning, why would anyone, especially an American soldier, cross into North Korea? It is the same question his family has, but they just want him back.
I can't function. I can't think straight. It feels like I'm in a big nightmare.
This morning, the mother of missing U.S. Army Private Travis King speaking out while her son in custody in North Korea.
Once nighttime comes, I start worrying more because I don't know what they're doing to him.
The 23-year-old soldier's family calling on the U.S. government to help bring him home. But this is not a typical case of detention. King was supposed to be on a flight back to the U.S. last month after serving 47 days in a South Korean jail for an altercation. But
yeah, so this is the piece that you need to know. He was in jail in South Korea because of an altercation. Now, whatever that altercation was, I don't know. But what's interesting to me is you'll hear the family proceed to say, when they go on to mention that this type of behavior, this is not who he is, it wasn't typical of him. Well, would they say the same about the altercation that caused him to end up in a South Korean jail? Like, that's the thing. So it's not like this just happened out of nowhere and this guy just took off. There was already an incident that happened prior to this. And after leaving that jail, to run off to North Korea. So I want to bring that up. I think that's important for people to know that he was in prison, in jail, excuse me, in South Korea first. So just keep that in mind.
Instead of boarding the plane, officials say King left the airport and joined a tour of the DMZ, the heavily fortified.
Okay, let's come back here because I interrupted, and this part is very important so you can understand what happened to him after that release.
King was supposed to be on a flight back to the U.S. last month after serving 47 days in a South Korean jail for an altercation. But instead of boarding the plane, officials say King left the airport and joined a tour of the DMZ,
He chose not to go back home. Now, this is the piece that I think is very important. When he was released, he was supposed to get onto the plane to come back to the U.S., but he left the airport. So again, was he running away from something? Why would he then choose not to return back home? Or was there something back home he didn't want to face? These are the things we need to include and think about when we're trying to figure out why he just decided to run off to North Korea out of all the places to go to, because you know you're not going to, as a U.S. soldier, you know you're not going to be treated well if you run over to North Korea. Obviously, they're going to detain you and they're not going to want to let you come back to the U.S. So to me, if I'm thinking about this from a psychological perspective, it gives me the feeling that he did not want to come back home. Let's continue. Let's go on a little bit. Sorry. Okay.
Plane, officials say King left the airport and joined a tour of the DMZ, the heavily fortified demilitarized zone that separates North and South Korea. King, pictured here dressed in black, moments before, officials say he bolted across the border on purpose, right into the custody of the North Koreans, and was driven away in a van. His family in disbelief.
That's not Travis. Travis would not just go over the border like that. He's the type of kid, he would have wanted to come home.
But what happened to him when he was in custody in South Korea that maybe makes him not want to come back home? Maybe something happened to him there, you know?
No, he knew just going across that border is basically just committing suicide.
King's family says he was struggling prior to his disappearance. His uncle telling ABC News, Travis said he was experiencing racism during his military deployment to South Korea, and that after he spent time in jail, the messages King sent to his family no longer sounded like him.
Pause right here. So these are the things coming from the family. They said he was struggling before his disappearance. They go on to say he was experiencing racism during military deployment. That's also like not uncommon, right? Sent messages to the family that did not sound like him. It almost seems to me there was some type of trauma. We don't know all the details, but they'll go on to explain at least one of the messages that they did receive to him. But it seems like there was some type of trauma.
After we hear about this fight and him going to jail, the messages became strange. And I was like, "You okay?" And then he's telling me, "No, they're trying to kill me." And then he just continued to send these songs and speaking to me, and he saying things like, said they're racist. I don't know, it made me seem like something was going on with him. Like he was fearing for his life.
And his mother says she received a disturbing phone call in the middle of the night sometime.
So you guys heard that? He said that they were trying to kill him. Now, I don't know who they could be, other soldiers that were enlisted with him in his unit. I don't know. Could be civilians that he's referring to. I don't know. But it sounds like it might have been the people in the military. Let's continue. Let me go back just a little bit. Sorry.
His mother says she received a disturbing phone call in the middle of the night, sometime prior to Travis King crossing the border.
Like 3-something in the morning, I got a call from him, and I was half asleep, and he just called and he just screamed, "I'm not the Army soldier you want me to be. I'm not the Army soldier you want me to be." And he kept screaming that out loud. And then all of a sudden the phone hung up, and then they were taking him to the hospital.
King's family now.
You guys heard that? I'm not the Army soldier that you want me to be. Mm-hmm.
Sudden the phone hung up, and then they were taking him to the hospital.
King's family now searching for answers and trying to do anything they can to get him back.
The administration says it is doing whatever possible to get Travis King back. It might be an encouraging sign that North Korea has acknowledged they are now holding him, but it could be a very long time before their so-called investigation is over.
Being in the military is not easy. And it can do things to you, you know. There are things that you may witness, things that you may experience that you'll never forget, especially if you have to go to battle. And he's 23 years old. And he was a private. One of the things that I can tell you is the lower the rank, the harsher they are on you. What's really interesting to me about that story, and I've watched several interviews, I've read multiple articles about that story. I have yet to see or hear from his unit. Where is the commanding officer? Why aren't they doing any interviews? Something to think about.